Okay, we're on the hour, so I'm going to begin. So welcome everyone, thanks for coming today. I work with INTRAC, and INTRAC's an international development charity which has been supporting civil society organisations globally for the last 30 years. We specialise in monitoring, evaluation and learning, and also organisational development support, and we do that through ethical and values-driven consultancy, research and training. My name is Lucy Morris, and I'm based in Bristol in the UK, and I work as a principal consultant for organisational development. In the past, I've worked in senior leadership roles during times of change. I've also worked in programme and partnership management roles and advisory roles with a mixture of the UN, the Red Cross, international NGOs, and also national organisations in the UK and Kenya. I'm really passionate about positive change and transformation, and I'm a qualified coach. I'm really glad to be here with you all today for this session.
And my name is Anna Kukuni, and I work with INTRAC as a senior training coordinator. I've worked with INTRAC for the last 3 years, and I live in Reading, and I moved to the UK 10 years ago. Before coming to the UK, I worked with various international development organizations, NGOs, and faith-based organizations for over 20 years in East Africa. I'm also training to be a coach and really looking forward to this session today with you all, and welcome.
Great, thanks, Anna. So this session's about change and opportunity. So why are we doing this session? Why now? So we know it's a time of really profound change. And we also know that in times of profound change, maybe counterintuitively, it's actually really useful to pause. So this session invites you and your organisation to exhale and to make some space for reflection, for some emotional release, and a collective acknowledgement of what has been. That's because only by letting go will we be ready to breathe in new possibilities. So this session will also help equip you with some practical tips to support you and your colleagues at this time. And this is the first of 2 sessions. So today we exhale, and next time we're going to inhale and create space for new energy and possibilities.
So welcome to the session again, everyone. And let's begin by gently arriving into this space. If you feel comfortable, you can soften your gaze or even close your eyes if you wish. Bring your attention to your breath. Inhale, nice and steady, and exhale to release. Now, I invite you to think of a practice or dynamic you've noticed at your work. Maybe one you find frustrating or disheartening, something that shows up again and again. It could be unhealthy power dynamics, micromanagement, self-protection, or unhealthy competition. Whatever it is for you, just bring it to mind with no judgment. Now, I invite you to take a deep breath and imagine breathing in that pattern. Let it land. Feel its weight. And now, exhale completely and let it go. Let it go. Breathe that thing out of your system, just for now.
Thank you so much, Anna. So what we'll do now is we'll just explain how the session's going to run. So if you can move forward a couple of slides, I'll show you the outline. So we know that change brings up lots of emotions. So we're going to start by sharing some agreements to create positive space for the session. And then I'll briefly share some of my own personal experiences of working myself out of a job and helping to close an organisation down. That sounds really depressing. Hopefully it won't be completely depressing. Next, I'll share a model that helps map the emotional journey of change. And then you'll have the option to join a breakout room to discuss it with others, or you also have the option to just reflect on that individually. And then we'll have a follow-up conversation in plenary about it. And then after that, I'll share some insights from what we've been hearing in INTRAC's internal listening to the sector initiative. And I'll also share some practical tips on navigating change and letting go with integrity. And then we'll close by sharing some additional resources and run a quick poll, and we'll give you a brief preview of the follow-up session next week. So hopefully that sounds like what you're here to do. So because we only have 60 minutes, we're only going to have time for a few breaths together, but I really hope you come away having some sense of what is falling away and also some practical tips to navigate these times. And if you have any questions during the session, please pop them into the chat. And if we don't have time to address them all during the session, we'll either respond in next week's session or via email afterwards. So I hope that sounds okay. So I'll pass back to you, Anna.
Thank you. So before we start, let's take a moment to create the kind of space we want. Change and transitions often involve a loss of some kind. It can stir up resistance, grief, even confusion. And that's okay. Let's agree in this space that we are not here to judge ourselves or others. We listen to understand, not to respond. We stay curious, even when something feels unfamiliar. What might be happening for you? And what might be happening for others? And as always, please know you have a choice. You can step out of any moment or exercise. No explanation needed. Your reflections are valid. Your boundaries are respected. Let's take one more breath together to anchor ourselves, and then we continue. As Lucy said earlier, that we will have breakout rooms at some point during the session. If you do not want, please, I repeat, if you do not want to join a breakout room discussion at that time and prefer to have time to reflect individually, add letter I before your name.
Great, thanks, Anna. Can we have the next slide, and that just recaps those agreements that Anna's just described?
Yeah, so here is our agreement, and I hope all of us would be respectful of them.
Wonderful, thank you. So next, I'm going to share a personal story about working myself out of a job, and also what I learned from helping to close down an organisation that I cared really deeply about. So I joined Every Child, which was a British international NGO supporting children without parental care, in 2011, and I joined as a programme manager. And at the time, the organisation had just begun a shift. So it was shifting from running its own operations, mostly in Eastern Europe, in response to the institutionalisation of children in orphanages there. And it was shifting to forming partnerships with national organisations in countries such as Ghana, Uganda, Nepal, and Cambodia. And it was really exciting. It was a really hopeful time. We were initiating new programmes. We were raising funds guided by a new equitable partnership policy. And that same year, Every Child helped to establish a new alliance called Family for Every Child. So this was slightly separate to Every Child. Every Child was incubating. And this was an international network of national NGOs, which was designed to create greater impact by amplifying local expertise. And the long-term plan was for Every Child to join this alliance and continue as one of its members. But then something really unexpected happened. So the Alliance Steering Committee made a bold decision, which was that Every Child wouldn't be allowed to join. Why? Because we were essentially a donor and not a practitioner, and we didn't have any programmes supporting children in the UK. So if we'd have been included, it would have impacted on the power balance within an alliance, which was supposed to be an alliance of equals. So suddenly we faced a crossroads. Every Child could carry on as a mid-sized INGO, or it could take a more radical step, which was to shut down operations and transfer assets and energy to the alliance, so handing over both funding and power. And to their credit, Every Child's leadership chose the latter. And it wasn't because of a financial crisis, it was because it aligned with the organisation's values. Now, what that meant in real terms was we had to close 13 programmes and 5 country offices in just a few years, and eventually close the organisation itself. And yes, that included working ourselves out of our jobs. When the decision came through, I was actually in Ghana with a colleague launching a new pilot project with a partner, and had to explain to the partner in real time that we were changing direction. And that was quite awkward, to say the least. I think it's fair to say that it took a while to come to terms with that decision, because many of us had joined Every Child to build something. But that ambition to create greater impact for vulnerable children by transferring power and assets to national organisations was really compelling. And we came to realise that closing well and handing over power and resources could be a creative process too. So we approached that transition with care, and we set up a change management team. We provided stress management training for staff and managers. We developed clear transition key performance indicators, which we reported against to the board. And we looked again at country strategies for that remaining period and really challenged ourselves around the contents. And that led in some cases to actually shifting the approach much more to supporting national governments or partners to take the lead in advocacy initiatives, for example. We also invested in that exit and closure process, so trying to still give staff new opportunities and also giving partners additional capacity strengthening support in that time. And as importantly, we also created what we called responsible exit principles to guide that process. So giving staff and partners time and respect and transparency over how that change would take place. In 2016, Every Child formally closed, and a few staff transitioned to a family for Every Child, and the rest of us moved on. And today, that new alliance is now 10 years old. It's grown to 51 members. It has a turnover of £3.5 million, and nearly all of that is raised from individual donors. So what do I carry forward? That closing down can sometimes be as values-driven, as strategic and impactful as building something up, and that giving up control can lead to deeper impacts, and that leadership sometimes means knowing when to step aside. One of the things I found really helpful during the Every Child transition process, and this was part of our stress management training, was this Kubler-Ross change curve. So I'm really curious, has anyone come across it before? If you have, put your hands up or just say yes in the chat. See if anyone's come across it. So yes. We've got some thumbs up, at least one person's seen it. Thank you. So for those that haven't seen it before, or maybe as a refresher, so the Kubler-Ross change curve describes the emotional journey people go through during change, and it's adapted from the stages of grief, and it helps us understand and support others through transitions too. So I'm going to just introduce it briefly now. So you'll see that it's got 2 axes on the graph. So along the bottom is time, and along the side is morale and confidence. And that's because often we can really experience feelings of confusion and lack of confidence when we're asked to change. Suddenly, we go from knowing what we're doing to feeling actually we don't so much know what we're expected to do anymore. And I'll just describe the 7 stages here. So first one is shock. So people may feel really stunned or confused or frozen. The second is denial. So that's a refusal to accept the change, just hoping it's temporary or not real. And the third is frustration. So you may feel anger or resistance as that impact becomes clearer. What does it mean in practice? You might then feel depression, so motivation dropping, people feeling overwhelmed, low or disengaged. And then starting to come out the other side is a moment of experimentation. So this is a bit of a turning point. And this is where individuals start to test out new behaviours and to adapt. And then a decision point. So this is where confidence is building. People either commit to that new direction, or maybe actually they decide to leave, that it's not right for them. And then integration is where the change becomes part of that new normal, and where productivity and morale hopefully recover. So we know that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So hopefully this one might be useful for you, as imperfect as it is. I also want to acknowledge that change isn't linear. So this model suggests a one-way process. It definitely doesn't work like that. Sometimes you move back and forth through stages, and that's really normal too. So just as an example, when the news was announced to every child, first I was really shocked. I just didn't believe it. Then I felt really frustrated, like how could they after all the work we'd put in to build up these new partnerships? Then I felt really upset for a while, knowing what that meant for our partners, their communities, also for people's jobs. So morale and confidence really low. And then as a program management team, we started to experiment with new ways of working. So while that decision to close down had already been taken, we realized we could still meaningfully consult with partners on when and how that transition would take place. And confidence was just starting to build. And then, as a team, we decided on a series of transition-related commitments, so morale continued to increase at that point. And then finally, we started integrating our new ways of working with our partners. So that included having transition and indicators. What was it that every child was committing to? What were partners committing to in that transition process? Having end of partnership calls, and also really celebrating what was going well, what had been achieved. So I'd like to invite you now to reflect on a change you're currently experiencing in relation to your work and just locate yourself on this curve somewhere. Where are you now? And now just take a minute to check in with your body. So what's your body and your breath telling you about where you are? Might sound like a strange question. Maybe it's confirmed what you originally thought, or maybe you realize you're actually in a slightly different stage. We know that when change happens fast and you're not in control of it in particular, it can feel really painful if you're not allowed enough time to process that change, to grieve, to honour, to acknowledge things from the past in that process. So I'd like you to just spend a little bit of time individually reflecting on that change. And what's one thing that you would like to acknowledge or honour or grieve about what has gone before? So just take a minute. What are you acknowledging, honouring, or grieving about what's gone before? And I'll pass back to Anna at this point.
Okay. Now, for those of you who would like to dive deeper with others, we are offering optional breakout rooms. Abby is kindly offering to help us with the breakout room. In these small groups, feel free to introduce yourselves. What do you see or sense is changing? What are you acknowledging, honoring, or grieving about what is changing? A loss? What helps you stay grounded during these times of change? Reflect on where your teams or organizations are in the change process. And if you found practices that help, drop them on the Padlet, a link that will be shared by Lucy in a minute. We all learn from each other. Abby now will put you into breakout rooms. And if you'd rather just stay here and reflect alone, you're very welcome to do so. Please remember to download the PDF. I'll put the PDF on there. Lucy has also added the PDF there because you might need to use it as reference in your discussion groups. So here is the exercise, and you'll be in the breakout rooms for 15 minutes. I'll post the questions in the chat.
Great, thanks, Anna. So we'll just be here in the background as folks just spend some time individually reflecting. For those people that wanted to work individually, please do add your thoughts into the Padlet as well. I'll pop that back into the chat for you to hear. welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, and we hope you had good discussions. And for those ones who stayed here, we hope you reflected, on the questions as well. So let's bring our energy back together. And remember that change isn't a straight line, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. What stood out for you during those conversations you had? Any insights, patterns, even contradictions? Please feel free to share. And what are you grieving, honoring, or noticing about what's shifting? Please use the Padlet if you want to add insights. Lucy has reshared the Padlet on the chat, and I hope you had use of it. So feel free to reflect honestly. Your truth belongs here. And if you're carrying a helpful insight or practice from someone else, that's welcome too. Let's pause for a few minutes while you gather your thoughts. Does anyone want to share?
If you do, feel free just to unmute and speak up, or pop a hand up, or put something in the chat. There's also lots of really good stuff in the Padlet, so we can always take a look there if folks don't want to speak up. But yeah, as Anna says, what really stands out to you? Anything new for you? So Rose in the chat. Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rose. There is a lot about locus of control and feeling that the global landscape and changing world is affecting everyone. Thanks, Rose, for sharing. Anyone else wants to unmute and say something? Christine says lots of similarities and sharing space was valuable. Thank you, Christine. Yeah. Fergus, thank you for sharing. Despite all the changes, we still have things to offer, which is quite true. You're allowed to speak if you want. Irena, thank you. The speed of change at the moment makes it difficult to decide what change would help. Thank you, Irena. Elizabeth, despite the gloomy financial status, we are still hopeful. Yes, we continue to hope. Graham, we may recognize the extent of change needed, but that is in tension with solidarity, sympathy with all those, including ourselves, who may lose jobs, livelihoods. That's very true and very touching. Thank you. Lucy, do you want to read out the rest?
Thanks, Anna. Nice quote from Rob Bowden. He's being reminded of Bayle's words that when the times are urgent, we must slow down. But that is sometimes easier to quote than to actually do. Yeah, so true, isn't it, Rob? Actually, it's so counterintuitive, particularly in humanitarian organisations, just to pause, to take a breath and to reset so you know which direction to head off in next. There's lots of really interesting things in the Padlet as well. I've not had a chance to take a look at all of them, but in terms of what people are seeing or sensing is changing, so just dip into those. So the sense of security in the modern world is changing. Lots more worry, the climate emergency, lots of uncertainty around work, and lots more competition for limited resources, which can be both positive and negative. Feeling unsettled, a sense that things will be different in the UK in the next 10 years in terms of the sector, both here and internationally, but not sure quite how. Yeah, I'll let others go and take a look there. We'll share these with you afterwards as well. So what are folks acknowledging or honouring or grieving about what's gone before? So the acknowledgement that actually much of the change is completely out of your control and decisions made by others. And that doesn't mean that you failed as an individual or a person, as an individual person or team member, and that you can't make all the changes, and that may be necessary, and that's okay. And that's so hard, I think, sometimes to accept, particularly in this sector, but actually so healthy. Like, yeah, none of us can individually save the world. None of us can individually control the changes that are happening. Bringing it back to what can you control, and that's ultimately how you choose to respond and engage. That's a really important point there. Others are grieving confidence in a known and understood reality. The loss of confidence is really hard, yeah. And grieving the sense that progressive values and commitments seem to be rapidly disappearing, yeah. What helps? Sorry, go ahead.
We have three of us, all at different stages on the model.
Interesting.
And all with real problems to face. And I think we came to the conclusion that this is just part of humanity, that I'm just graduating as a coach in positive psychology. And that encourages us to look back to our character strengths. There are free questionnaires for that kind of stuff to find out what they are, and to start to use them in our new challenges to do, and that all things must pass. Life is always about change, and it's always about overcoming our obstacles, and a recognition that actually it's very difficult for us, but it's a lot harder for the people who actually need food, shelter, water, etc., who are not going to get it. So yeah, it's about that kind of perspective. But everything is always in constant change, and we have to accept and move on with it.
Thanks so much, David. Yeah, I think helpful to keep a perspective on, who are these changes impacting the most. It can feel very personal, but I think a good reminder.
So thank you for sharing that. And we will be sharing these notes later with you after the session. And people continue sharing. Please feel free to continue putting that in the Padlet or in the chat. That is so welcome. So for us to just know and acknowledge that even though change is important and it always happens, transitions can bring up fear, not just fear of the unknown, but fear of loss, roles we held, relationships we valued, or meaning we attach to our own work. So please take a moment to yourself. What are you most afraid of in this moment of change? And what might that fear be pointing to about what matters deeply to you? So Lucy, I hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Hannah. I think that's such a helpful challenge. So let me then shift tack a little bit. So I'm going to share some insights from what INTRAC's been noticing about what's been happening in the sector. Probably no surprises there, but it might be useful just to share that. And we've got a couple of slides. I'll also share some suggested top tips for navigating organisational change and endings as well. So between February and June this year, INTRAC staff have been regularly sharing insights from calls also articles, and coming together. Some of us have come together weekly to try and make sense of all of those changes and what's happening. We've also hosted a call with some of the organisational development consultants in our global network around the world. And we've also recently had an internal workshop with an organisation called the Decelerator that do really fascinating work. And that was just last month. So these are kind of a culmination of insights from those different processes. Is it possible to share the slides again, please? So what we're seeing is, on one level, the sector is really experiencing widespread disruption due to that large-scale funding crisis. This won't be a surprise, I'm sure. This is part of many of the conversations that you're involved in at the moment. And those most recent, high-profile cuts are having really layered impacts. So first-wave impacts are being directly felt by organisations that have lost funding. But the second and third wave impacts are rippling out to others, including those who are not direct recipients, through disruptions to related funding streams and broader cultural and systemic shifts. And INTRAC certainly not immune to these as well. And the emotional landscape is really complex and tense at the moment. So that's including a deep anxiety about livelihoods, about the erosion of historic progress in development, about the well-being of colleagues and also partners overseas and communities overseas and in the UK. We also notice a sense of paralysis in some spaces, so uncertainty, really stalling decision-making, where the absence of any good options has stifled the consideration of the options that are available. And also a feeling in some cases of just unmanaged chaos rather than deliberate and really strategic adaptation. And there are also some signs of resilience and possibility. So in some forums, hope and relief are being expressed, and others are moving quickly to explore solutions, innovations, adaptive strategies. And this will be the topic of next week's call, where we're sort of inhaling, what is it that's new and actually exciting and energizing, that is healthy and that we can draw in. So on the next slide, just a quick summary of some of the key themes that are emerging in response. So for some, this moment is being framed as part of a deeper transformation. So really doubling down on those agendas of localization, power shifting, decolonization, anti-racism that are so important and that have gained traction across the development and aid sectors in recent years. There's also widespread discourse around the need to reimagine organizational models and core missions. There's also talk of innovative and alternative financing models, and that's a really leading feature of many conversations, such as the growth of African-led philanthropy, for example. And meanwhile, collaborative infrastructure, for example, shared services like fiscal hosting and back donor functions, is being discussed in many spaces. And alongside all of this are growing calls for structural consolidation, and that includes things like mergers and the streamlining of institutions. So these are some of the themes that we've been noticing, and I'm sure there's more to say here. So with all this in mind, we thought it could be useful to share some of our top tips for navigating, organizational change, also endings responsibly. So here are our top 8. We'd love to hear yours too. So the first one, be clear on your why. Really hold tight to your organization's purpose and values, so not necessarily the organization's ongoing existence. So if you think about the change I described whilst at every child, then what we did was really placing the best interests of children at the center of the decision making and being guided by that, as opposed to keeping the organization going, indefinitely. The second is recognize that endings are a necessary and healthy part of that cycle of renewal for people and organizations, particularly those engaged in change work. As someone was saying earlier, it's normal, it's healthy, and actually endings make space for new actors, new beginnings to begin, but they can't if there's no space for that. The third, as we've been doing today, is acknowledge the emotional journey of change. So providing support to your colleagues, to staff, to volunteers, engaging with resistance constructively. And by that, I guess what I mean is that oftentimes people will resist because there's something really important they're trying to hold tight to, and that may be an organizational value that maybe others haven't understood in the same way. So just get curious about that resistance, engage with it constructively. And also celebrating achievements. That's a great way to keep the momentum going as you move through change processes and kind of keep the energy up. And then fourth, making organisational change as participatory as possible. So even if you're having to make cuts, for example, quite quickly, usually there's something that you can adapt to ensure that staff and partners, if that's relevant, have a level of agency in that change. And we know that giving some level of control to people are talking about the locus of control. The more control people have, the more positive they're likely to feel about that thing. It also helps them to retain some dignity in that process. The fifth is understanding the technical, practical, and legal steps needed. And identifying key milestones. You may change your plan, but having a sense of direction and how you know collectively that you're getting there is really helpful. The sixth is resource the change. So to put here people, funding, I'd also suggest time, even where time can be poor, but where you have actually some flexibility, allowing enough time for that change to be done well is really helpful. Not too much. It's such an art and a science, isn't it? But sometimes if you allow too much for change, but actually people don't change because they don't feel like they need to. And then clarifying roles and sharing responsibility. So that's a piece around the resourcing. And then the seventh is communicating openly and regularly. So even if there's nothing new to share, and again, when I was at Every Child, I joined by this point the senior management team, and we were kind of saving up the communication to staff because we thought, okay, we need to give a proper update, when things have changed. Actually, what staff said they needed was more drip information, even if nothing had changed. It was just helpful to keep having regular communication because otherwise people just start to imagine worst case scenarios in that silence. And then finally, looking after and resourcing yourself. So some of the suggestions people have shared already in the Padlet really helpful. So this is also, it's personal practice as well as professional practice, looking after ourselves in this change process. So hopefully some of these are useful for you and curious to know what you think in the chat. But I'll pass back to Anna at this point. You're on mute, Anna.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking to myself in the background. I apologize. So remember the question I asked us in this room, what are we afraid of? Again, I said transitions bring fear. And sometimes that is the fear of an unknown, but fear of loss and relationships we might have valued and the meaning we attach to our work. So I'm inviting yourself or ourselves to ask this question to us. What are you most afraid of in this moment of change? What might that fear be pointing to about what matters deeply? Please feel free to add that in the Padlet or just sit with it privately. No need to share unless you feel moved to. Please remember, even as we make space for what's ending, let's not forget something new is always beginning. Change cracks us open, completely open. It's uncomfortable, but it also lets in the light. Ask yourselves, what's a possibility, however small, that could grow from this transition? What might shift open for us or soften in a way that matters? You're welcome to put your thoughts on Padlet or on the chat. Lucy is going to be sharing some resources that we've curated and put together on this topic, so you can have them to hand.
Great, thanks, Anna. Can you pop the slides back up? And we're coming towards the end now. So yeah, I put together this list of resources yesterday. I wanted to keep it to one page. There was lots more to share. There's some good ones already I'm seeing referenced in the chat here too. But hopefully a mix of kind of personal support, organisational change support. If you move forwards, yeah, great. So I really like this quote: wherever there is change and wherever there is uncertainty, there is also opportunity. So allowing us to recognise what's falling away, also starting to get glimpses of what's coming into the future. And a nice quote here from Thich Nhat Hanh: it's not impermanence that makes us suffer. What makes us suffer is wanting things to be permanent when they're not. So hopefully that's helpful too. What we're going to do now is hopefully Abby can launch a poll. So just get some thoughts from you about, kind of as organisations, what is it you're really grappling with now? And, what topics are you interested in, if any of these sound interesting? So just take a minute. It'd be great to have your feedback on this, also to help us think, how can INTRAC best support the sector at this time, which feels really important. Hopefully that's popped up on your screen.
Is anyone struggling to see the poll?
I think it just takes a little time to answer because
Yeah.
some of these are chunky questions.
I think the pool is on the Padlet or here on Zoom?
On the screen.
Yeah, it should be here on Zoom.
Did it appear on
Then
your
I
screen? It should appear on your screen.
Not yet, sorry.
A few people saying they can't see it.
Yeah.
If you can't see it, then we'll also try sharing that separately afterwards. So yeah, we're getting some entries, but I think for some reason it's not working well for everyone. So we'll also do a different version of it and share that afterwards. Sorry if it's not working for you. I'm just mindful of time, so do keep filling that in if you haven't already and if you have access to it. But if we move to the next slide, I'll just share what to expect and what's coming next. So next week, we've got the second session. So this is about inhaling new possibilities. So this will be at the same time next week, next Thursday. And then in case it's of interest, INTRAC's running a couple of training courses in the starting in September. So one's on coaching skills for partnership staff and one's on decolonising safeguarding. So those two may or may not be of interest to you. And then finally, on the last slide, then INTRAC's been supporting organisational change, for 30 years. This is the work that INTRAC loves to do. And so if you're in the middle of an organisational change and would like support, we're offering a couple of things, recognising this particular moment for the sector. So one is a 1-hour complimentary transition coaching call. And we've got a maximum of 4 calls available between July and September, 4 calls a month. So if you're interested in those, feel free to get in touch. And we're also offering complimentary 30-minute calls to explore how we might support you or your organisation. So again, if you're interested, please drop us an email on info@intrac.org. We'd love to talk to you. And we really hope that today's session's been helpful for you. So I'll pass to Anna for a closing word in case she has any.
Yeah. So yeah, just short closing words, and I would say that please remember, endings are not failures. They are thresholds. And the question might not just be, what are we afraid of? But what are we ready for? Remember, we talked about possibilities. This could also be a possibility. Thank you for